If you're watching this, this means that season 1 secret ending has been solved. So this video took me way longer than I thought it would take for me to make, because I thought that I could just do it as per normal, like maybe make it a bit special with like how I do it, but in the end I couldn't remember a lot of stuff, like the format, like there's so many details going to each puzzle that I sometimes lose my train of thought and have to restart recording over and over. So this time I made a Google document for me as a script and for you guys as a document explanation guide. Before I start, I always have 3 rules that I force myself to follow. Number 1, as you always see from every video, there's always a disclaimer and assume that you guys have tried everything possible. There is no point for me explaining how to solve the puzzle if you guys never even tried before. It's basically as good as doing a mock test but cheating in it, even though it doesn't affect your grade in any way whatsoever, which is bullshit. Like you're meant to learn so that you could actually do the actual test properly. So number 2, you must be absolutely convinced. Whatever explanation I give you, whatever bullshit I give you, it always must be convincing with all the hints and all the clues given to make it sound reasonable, and why you solve it that way and like how you end up getting it. And number 3, everything must be the way the original puzzle makers intended it to be. I do not want to end up doing the wrong method and then it turns out that, hey, it turns out that you're supposed to do the other method. No, bullshit. So yeah, this is kind of like, this is kind of an intro which is longer than usual, but with that said, I hate Kennedy, Curvy, Andrew. Let the explanation begin. So the first thing that you want to, where most people probably realize, is this platinum keypad. You know, this is it can input 8 digits into it, and obviously we could probably input some sort of code into it, right? So how do we do it? So from chapter 6 part 1, we can see a note saying remember Othello is key. So the word key is very familiar to us already, because in chapter 6 part 3 we already kind of get a point of using a keyword to help us solve and use the lime code. But however, we still need a message or code or some sort of message to we want to encrypt or decrypt it using some sort of a cipher with a key. Maybe we're not sure. Like our biggest guess might be lime code, but we're not sure. So what is the code that we're supposed to decrypt? If you go over here in chapter 6 part 3, you actually see there is this note which is like kind of scrambled and all this stuff. Let's be honest, you can't read this. Unless you are very good at reading and deciphering ciphers, then good job for you. And basically you realize that the key Othello is used to help and decrypt this part of this code. However, there is one problem. Most people will immediately assume this will be lime code, since this note is found in chapter 6 part 3, and there is a lime code here which involves a keyword. So most people will assume that you're supposed to use the lime code. However, if you try to use the lime code, number 1, it will take up way too much time, and number 2, you will get it wrong and get it gibberish. Trust me, it is gibberish. Do not try it yourself. So what do? However, there is a very well-known cipher, if you actually play enough escape rooms, I guess, or ARGs, that involves a key as well. It's called a Virginia cipher. So by putting it into a Virginia cipher converter that I randomly found online, you will see that the text says, "Hey Sam, I reset that code leads up to the try-press. I updated the password so it's always today's date. That way it's a little more secure, but it's also still easy to remember." So whatever the code that we have to input here for this thing, it is an 8-digit code that is always the date that it takes place in. So we want to figure out what is the date that the whole escape room shenanigans take place in, aka the date that we are trapped in here as a character in the game. So in chapter 2, the second room, we can see that there's a computer stating what kind of task we need to do for the 4 digits to get the 4 digits for the code to unlock the the hatch to enter the vent maze. However, there's actually another piece of information that is arguably way more valuable than that, and that for the secret ending, and that is the to-do date. The to-do date, today's date, is basically Monday, January 23rd. So of course I can understand that it's January 23rd, but we do not know the year. This is where another poster comes into play. Inside the room with the stack of TVs, there is a poster stating that the remote is in the maze, the vent maze. You probably remember that. However, there's also, just like the computer, there's another piece of information which is very useful, and that is the invention of the remote. It has existed from, according to the poster, from 1950 until now, which is a century. That now refers to 2050, so we know that we are at least in the year 2050 or higher. There's also, and if you're checking the Google document that I uploaded in the description and the pinned comment, you also be able to tell that that I also added about the 12 children kidnapped poster from chapter 4. That one is another piece of information just to help solidify everything. It doesn't really need to do it. You could just read through all this part. I'm just going to gloss over it. But basically, we know that we are in a year of at least 2050 or higher, with the date in the year being January 23rd, which is a Monday. And if you check the calendar, there is only one year which is likely possible, and that turns out, which is very close to 2050, and that is the code. The code which is gonna be January 23rd, 2051, or 01232051. Now that we unlock this room, now that we unlock the top area, we basically sorry. Now that we unlock this room, we basically, now what? You don't know what to do, right? So, let me explain. Okay. In chapter 6 part 2, there is a blueprint stating Outpost 1 with a room which, if you've played chapter 6 part 3 before, is very familiar. It's very familiar, which I kind of spoiled it for you, but because it is the exact layout of the map in chapter 6 part 3. You know, everything here, like for example the stairs over there, this weird area over there, kind of stuff. However, there you might notice there is two hidden rooms in the bottom left corner of the blueprint that we do not see. In this case, it is right over here. We can tell that we can enter from here into this area to the two rooms. However, it's just a wall and a couch blocking our way. So, what do we need to do? Likely, we need to do something which destroys the wall so that we can enter. How do we do that? Just like the normal method to do chapter 6 part 3, it is a lot of trial and error to figure out, but don't worry, I'm just going to skip through all the trial and error because you guys just have to follow instructions. Step 1, you want to go get the bed sheet, which is up here. You do not need to go to this room or even enter the code at all. That room is irrelevant. You still want to get the bed sheet from the bedroom, the rubble, and the wrench. You still want to get those three. And the first three parts are actually just like the same thing as the normal way of doing it. You want to disassemble the flashlight in order to put the rubble into the empty flashlight so that you can officially break this glass over here. Next, you still want to go inside here to get the beaker. You still want to go here, get the towel shot and the sledgehammer, and you also still want to get the nice security cameras over there. Yeah, and yes, you still do need to get the nitric acid with the help of the empty beaker. And yes, you do want to combine a few items, but however, some things are going to change. So firstly, you still want to disassemble the 9 security cameras to get a total of 9 wires and 9 scrap metal. This will take me a while since I'm not very fluent in my mouse movements. And you still definitely want to disassemble the sledgehammer so that you could combine the towel shot with the mallet. You still want to combine the wires into long wires, a total of 4 long wires. And you still want to combine the 4 long wires into a total of 2 braided wires. However, this is where things get a little bit different. combine one of the braided wires with a battery to get a half circuit, and combine the half circuit with the other braided wire to get a short circuit extra large. Now this is where we can continue from here. Normal method, we still want to use the wrench to remove the plastic caps, and we still want to use the nitric acid to remove the metal bolts. We still want to use the sharp mallet to destroy this glass to a fume hood. Sorry, I misclicked, my bad. And you still want to use the water tank to take out the fire. However, this is where things go off the rails of the normal method, and this is where you may notice you can interact with this. This is because you want to put the bed sheet over this and also put the empty tank above. What it's actually doing is so that we can prepare to put all the scrap metal in here. So the scrap metal, the chemicals which will come out is hydrogen gas, which will flow up and be into this tank. Getting the tank full of hydrogen gas, we can finally go back to the workbench for our last time, and we'll combine the hydrogen gas with the short circuit extra large to create a hydrogen bomb. Bomb is very good for destruction, and you can place it at almost any part of the wall you want. You know, you can place it here, you can place it there, here. But remember, from the blueprint we see in Outpost 1 in Chapter 6 Part 2, we want to place it here. And after when you place it, just connect the wires, and the timer sets to 0. You can always stay in this room forever, and you can come in here. Now you come in here, and then you realize there is an 11-digit code that you do not know what it could be. It could be literally anything, who knows. And you see a computer which you can turn on the power. Now turning on the power of the computer, you will see this. This might not seem like much to many people, but if you use computer a little bit, or at least decent enough, you might know what this is because of the slash over here. And additionally, what solidifies it even more is that it is 8-character input to and dot. If people do not know this already, the code for this is terminal. Reason being is 2 reasons. Number 1, it's the name of the game. It's a name drop. Like, the game is literally terminal. It's terminal. And number 2, all computers have a computer terminal so that you could input commands. So we want to input the command terminal to enter the terminal, computer terminal, you know. So you should be able to see the home screen, and the only command that you can see is help. So we type help, enter, and finally we'll see 3 more commands, which is /home, which is return back what you saw. Escape basically exits the user out of computer terminal and the computer itself. And finally, commands. Commands gives you way more commands on what you can input. You will see all of this. You can read this on your own time. However, for the purpose of the explanation of the escape room, we will want to first go into the chat room. Go into the chat room, you will see that Janice is talking to you. See, this is Janice, which is the user ST5A0804. Whew. Okay, water break while she's typing. Okay, so while she's typing, I'll quickly summarize what's happening. So from this text conversation, we know that ST5A0804 is Janice. Janice is the one who has been helping us throughout this way ever since we are able to enter the vents into chapter 5. Enter into the chapter 5 area, where she helps us with a note saying what we need to do and with a level 1 key card. However, she does know that in chapter 4 we have used the shrink and grow platforms to be able to basically try to continue the escape room puzzles, and that has negative side effects which may kill us in the end. Literally, body, oh my god, like body die. Ooh, who would have thought? So what happens is that she actually has the computer with the lab notes for everything, but she does not, which she knows the password to because some guy forgot to some guy forgot to take the sticky note away and yeah, all this stuff. But she doesn't know what the file name is, so she doesn't know what to use the password on. So because we are on the computer directly connected to the actual Handlepix HQ, we are supposed to help her figure out what the file name is. So she'll give us the file name and the password for the directory to be able to check the file name, the file name format. So to exit the chat room, you want to type /home, and after that you just want to go to open as what Janice said, and we'll just put in the directory, and the password which she gave us is LBROT YNCD0 with the directory password being DGF8BG0R, and after that you just type open dir and enter. So once you enter, you'll see all of this. And also, before I continue, I do want to say, if you want to type in or anything, do not turn on cap lock, always turn it off. It automatically capitalizes the letters for you. And also, typing numbers will be a bit harder and a bit weird. So anyways, now that you're here, you will see all of this stuff and you might not know what this is. However, don't worry, I'll explain what this is with a little bit help of another command called /computer. /computer will send us to this serial code, like the specs of the computer basically. Basically it tells us what the serial code is, storage space, all those stuff. And if you have been paying attention, or in the case of trying to type something, you will realize that this name that we are given is the same as the serial code here. So that means that name is the serial code. That means we know from Janice's computer's name we can tell what her serial code is. But we still do not know what type of computer she is on, because if you remember from the lab notes, that shit is necessary. However, I'll break it down with what you see from here. GD1 represents the computer model index, GD1 literally. E represents the letter in the processing chip, so we don't include handle picks, but we check the last two, which is E3, E being up there. 02 represents the storage space, so if it's like 2 gigabytes, it is 02. If it's 32 gigabytes, it is 32. The last two numbers are basically the computer manufacturing year, which is 1985, which is 85. Simple enough, right? However, if you remember correctly, let me just type it all out real quick, if I can even type at all. So if you remember correctly, basically the year 85 could mean either like 1985 or 2085 and etc. as stated over here. So how do we know when is Janice's computer made? Well, this is very simple actually. A bit of a history lesson. The first ever PC was made in 1971. Even though a computer has been made way earlier, the only time where a personal computer was ever made, which is stuff like laptop and all those PCs, which is actually PC, all those laptops and all those kind of stuff, was ever made in 1971. And right now we know that we are in the year 2051. So judging from Janice's actually let me start. So we know that Janice's computer is made in 2004, which I'll explain why with her serial code. I'm going to show on the screen. Her serial code is ST5A0804. The first three letters are the computer model index, which is ST5. Processing chip letter is A, we know it's A. We don't know what kind of A, but A, that's it. Her computer have 8 gigabytes of storage as shown from 08. And finally the last two numbers, which is 04, which represents when her computer is made, which we know it ends with 04, but because the only time period where personal computers were ever a thing during the context of a game is 1971 to 2051, we know that the only year possible is 2004. So now let's try to figure out what the file name is for her to check. So firstly, we know that her computer is made after the year 2000 as stated earlier, so we have to follow this format. Let's do that. The first three characters are the abbreviated experiment category, which is this stuff down there. So remember, we want to figure out how to reverse the side effects of the shrink grow pads experimenting, which happened to us. And if you look through every single thing, the only thing which looks very similar to that or even close at all is size modification, SMD. So that's it, right? The first three characters are SMD, right? Not just yet, because please note you have to save the size file, the file size of the name. So you want to adjust the abbreviated experiment categories depending on the amount of storage space on her computer, which we know is 8 gigabytes. Following the 8 gigabytes, we know that you're supposed to only use characters A to P and 0 to 9, and S is not within the character A to P. So we have to basically adjust the letter S into a 5. The next two characters that we have to figure out is her computer manufacturing year, which we've already mentioned is 04. And finally, the last three characters are basically the computer model index, which I've already said is ST5. Knowing this, we can just head back to the chat room to tell Janice that the file she should look out for is 5MD 04ST5. I typed the wrong letter. I apologize for that. So 5MD04ST5. Sometimes it tags. So now Janice basically told us that it works, and she tells us that the lab notes have been encrypted by some sort of cipher or scrambler. She doesn't exactly know what, but it just looks like a bunch of random numbers. So she's gonna upload these to a server so that we can take a look, and did it. So this is the stuff that we have to enter: LABNTDLJ and the password. So we want to go back to home, and then we want to go to open, and we'll basically just type in LABNTDLJ, if I'm not wrong. Let me check. Yep, LABNTDLJ, and then after that the password is just password. Alright, let's begin. The first one that we see is just a bunch of numbers, as what Janice kinda say, except they all are within a certain range, from like around 32 to like I don't know, maybe like 120 something, maybe 119. I don't know, I never really dig too much into this, but essentially most people who have already like probably recognize this if you do enough either one, enough coding, number two, enough ciphers. This is in ASCII format, ASCII. So basically what you have to do is convert all these numbers from ASCII to text, and to do that you just search up some converter online and just put it in, and you should get this message. In order to maintain adequate security, lab notes on size modification have been stored behind a series of encrypted directories. The first one you need to access is TTTELEPS with the password good luck. So let's do that. Let's just type in TTTELEPS with the password good luck. Open dir, and we should see our first one. So the first one that we see is a bunch of ones and zeros, which is probably very familiar to almost everyone already. This is all in binary, so we have to convert from binary to text. However, people might ask, how many bits? How should we like separate all these ones and zeros? Well, the usually as a standard, all codes encrypted by binary are all in 8 bits, which is a total of 8 ones and zeros before you do a space in between. For example, you will probably count 1 0 1 1 0 1 0 1 0 0 0 0, then put a space in between this and repeat. So I won't bore you with all this. You could do this by yourself, but if you want to see what the text that shows up after you put all this in, it is password is FH9 WB31K. So let's do that. So to access this 0 HED 3wax, it is FH9 WB31K. The second one is basically to access this directory. You have to brighten up. This is very self-explanatory. You're supposed to brighten up the screen so that you can see the hidden text. By doing this, you should see the password G8W9PL0K. So let's just do that. I'm just gonna speed run this. X35XX. Oops, sorry. 45F. And the password is just as I say, G8W9PL0K. And then you open directory. Next one is to access this one, and it might seem a bunch of numbers, and this below part is a bit weird because it says PAS-SWO-RDIS. That is not a coincidence, because although it does spell out password is, this should be very familiar once you've done enough ciphers. In fact, I think this is one of the a bit more trickier ones, but it's not that bad because this is a keypad cipher. So the way keypad cipher works is usually there is a dash in between the numbers once in a while to differentiate what character it is or whether it's space or not. For example, if it's like 22, then there'll be a dash, 666 dash 5 dash, and so on all the way to the end, which is just 88. So how does keypad cipher work? Is basically you want to, if it's the number 2 for example, you want to check the button 2, which has the letters A, B, C in it. Then depending on how many 2s are there, you will check the position, check the first, second, or third, or maybe even fourth. For example, if there's 2 2s, then you check the second letter of the in the button number 2, which is a B. If it's 3 6, you check the third letter in the 6th button, which is O. Now I won't bore you with all of this again. You could try to do this keypad cipher thing yourself. But for the directory AXX2TL5H, you should be able to guess that and figure out that the password is BO. Sorry, I put 0 by accident. JHBOJHYEIU. To access this next directory, you'll see a bunch of 2s, 4s, and 9s, and it may seem confusing. This is one of the interesting part comes in. So first, you should be able to recognize there's a bunch of 24s, 29, just a singular 9, and 22s and all this stuff. I mean, they should have probably like made this clearer with a dot or something. I have no idea. I have no idea why they didn't separate it, but it looks weird. And after that, you may think of a normal way to do conversion, which is converting from numbers to letters, aka something like 1 equals A, 2 equals B, 3 equals C, etc. Now doing all of this, you should get XX, XXIII, XV, XX, IX, XIII, yeah, XIII, V, and XIX. So if those and you may listen to me say all these X and I's and V's, but some people may recognize it, which is what it's gonna be, as Roman numerals. By converting all the Roman numerals to base 10, which is just normal numbers, you will see 20, 23, 15, 20, 9, 13, 5, and 19. Converting from numbers to characters again with the same thing as 1 equals A and etc. You should get the password 2 times. So for the directory CLYXHLW2, you should get the password TWOTIMES 2 times. Next one you see is like square brackets and all those stuff, and if you've done a little bit of coding before, this may seem very familiar to you. This is kind of like how lists work, you know. So essentially what it's going to be is like, let's just say the word is order. If it's going to be order square bracket 3, you check the third letter of that word, which is D. So order square bracket 3 is D. However, the only problem is that we only see numbers. But however, numbers can also be converted into words. So for example, 5 can be converted into the word 5, F-I-V-E. 2 can be converted into the word 2, T-W-O. This is what we can do for each of these, and then we will be able to tell what letter it is based on the number in the square brackets. For example, 5 square bracket 1 is F, since F is the first letter of 5. 2 square bracket 3 is O, since the third letter of the word 2 is O. You could do this for every single one, so that at the end of the day, after you get the password for C40DEX08, you should get the password forgiven, F-O-R-G-I-V-E-N, forgiven. Next one, you will see a bunch of curly brackets with like, I don't know, like commas, dash, and slash. This might seem familiar to some people because of how there's 2 numbers with a comma and all this stuff. This is all graph work. You're supposed to plot all of this into a graph so that you'll be able to see what it's kind of saying. And I'll show the example which someone did in Discord on the screen right now. So for the password of directory 3BU1XTRS, you should get the directory password to be TSRLAYKQ. Next one you should see is a bunch of bold numbers and alternate bold and unbolded numbers. Well, this is actually trickier to figure out because this is all pixel work. So what is done is basically like they are all, if you add all of the numbers up, regardless whether they're bolded or not, together in rows, like row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, you should realize that all of these are the same. All the numbers added up after you add all the numbers up together are all the same. So what is exactly the method? You want the bold numbers represents how many pixels you have to put in the row, followed by the spacing of number of empty pixels, then bold again. For example, if the first one is 5, you put 5 pixels in a row, then skip 1 pixel to put an empty pixel, then put 4 pixels again because the next one is 4. After that you skip 2 pixels and then you put 4 and so on. This is what I did on the, this is how I did it, and this is what it should look like to you. I'm gonna show this on the screen. You, for the directory SXXSFHDW sorry, you should get the password TR74E NIV. And for this one, I think it's very self-explanatory on what you're supposed to do. This is basically like you're supposed to, it's all jumbled up, so you want to swap everything back to normal. This is what it should kind of look like. Yes, it looks pretty shit. Yes, I did it in Google Slides. No, it's not pretty. And yes, there's a bunch of random sentences, but however, if you look through all the sentences, you should be able to kind of tell what the password is. So for the directory 5 and then for 5 and then A, my bad. 5 and then A 1EXJ, you should get the password to be S9R4 KL31. Sorry if I feel like I just want to point out, sorry if I feel like, if it feels like I'm talking way too fast, you could slow down the video if you like, because I am just want to get this over with. This is way too much information for me to even share in one video. You see a bunch of jumble up, like spam of letters. Like you see a lot of spamming of letters. No idea why. No, like it doesn't make sense, right? And also below it says find hertz.sort. Hertz is the units for frequency. So you want to find the frequency of the number of letters, of each of the number of letters, and sort them by alphabetical order. This is kind of the coding which I did on Python, because I kind of know basic coding, I guess. And you should see all these numbers here. And if you check all the numbers other than the last 5, which is all 0, which is empty spaces, you realize that all the numbers are within the range of 1 to 26, and that is because you still want to do the same conversion again. 1 equals to A, 2 equals to B, and so on. So after you do all that, you should see the text. The password is okay. So first one, I'll just put this up here first for the directory, which is what you're gonna see on the screen, X03BRX13. After converting the numbers into characters, the text letters, you should see that it says the password is RCS KHEIQ. Open directory. And the final one, actually it is the final one, spoiler alert, oopsies. It says vertical stack error. This does not make sense. However, it does say title on top, so of course you want to put something involving a title, and then it has a vertical stack error. So to do this is actually gonna be interesting, because you want to take all the title names of all the directories we got ever since from the first one we accessed, which is the directory TTTELEPS. For people asking why it's not LABNTDLJ, which is the first one we got from JANICE, that's because inside, when you decipher the text in that directory, it says that the first one you need to access is TTTELEPS. So the first one is actually that and not the lab one. By doing this, you should be able to see what I kind of show you on the screen by putting the title names vertically and putting them all side by side from left to right, first one to last. And after that, the X is basically like spaces in between. You should be able to somewhat read. To access the lab node, you need to disable the firewall, the password, and then you realize that firewall is a command to enter and is currently active. So to disable it, enter in the matching password, the admin password, which the note says that the password is FH28SWJ3. Once you do that, just enter, and it says that the firewall is currently inactive and a new user has joined the chat room. So let's check who it is, right? And it's the X35XX0804 again, which is Janice. So yeah, okay, this is where things get a bit messy. So that person is gonna keep talking a lot of stuff and say that Janice is actually dead, and the person we are talking to is not Janice at all, but it's actually someone else. So it's like basically like surprise final twist that Janice is dead, like we don't see her anymore, and we've been talking to some other person this whole entire time. So the idea of like what Janice, that final person, the person behind that wants us to do is that she wants to play one final puzzle with us. So the point of this is basically asking her for information through certain keywords. After that, she will either respond back. She'll either respond back in whatever way, shape or form, or she will just not respond, and it indicates that this is not what you should look for. So let's begin with explaining all the keywords that is very important. So firstly is so I'll just show them on the screen. I will not bother with this. So the first one is hint 2, grid, TV, all the inputs from A1 to G29, which I'll only show A1 and G29, devil, and that's it. For the first part of the puzzle, we'll only need those. So let's first talk about some things. Hint 2 says 6 three separate times. Most people would combine the numbers together to form the number 666. You know, 666, which is linked to the devil number. So people might assume it's the devil number and will ask devil, as what I've shown earlier. However, Janice, I'll just call her Janice with inverted commas, you know. Janice says that it's not like the devil. Think a little more outside the box. Meaning, when she tells us 6, we're supposed to use 6 for something else and not anything referring to the devil number. Number 2, the inputs of A1 to G29 will all give a directory and password with the format as shown as up there because of the hashtag and the star indicating the directory and the password respectively. And if you were to check in each of the directories one by one, you will see a screen something like this with about 16 characters. 18 characters. Finally, when you ask about TV, Janice only responds back with ... indicating that we are very likely on the right track with TV. Especially when she mentions how the grid has to be landscape and not vertical, as mentioned when you ask about the grid. So, how do you solve it? So let the letters be rows, from A being the top to G being the bottom, and let the numbers 1 to 29 be the columns from left to right. So you will take all the 18 characters text into each of those 203 spaces respectively, and then what you want to do is, because of when you ask hint 2 is she says 3 separate times, you want to separate all the characters in each of the squares into 6 characters in each row. So basically 3 rows of 6 characters. And then after you do that for everything, you want to make the font size 18 because 666 adds up to 18, or it actually just makes it look makes it easier to see what's gonna happen. And you want to make the font Korea News. By doing this, you should actually see something like what I'm going to show you on the screen, which some guy actually painstakingly did all of this. It says that the directory that we have to access is S72JSFK1. So now that we have a directory of S72JSFK1, we also need a password, because every single directory has a password behind it. So how do we solve the password? If you remember the directory name format, it's always a hashtag, then 6 characters, then XX. XX being like null spaces as far as we've seen previously. So that means that whatever it is, it's hashtag 6 random characters. what do we do with that? If you look at all the characters, you might notice a familiar trend, which is that the characters are either number 1, numbers from 0 to 9, or number 2, letters from A to F. This is not a coincidence. This is what is very commonly known as base 16, also known as hexadecimal. To be more specific, we are using this for hex codes or color codes, as what I'm going to show you on the screen for easier reference. So by putting this into like a color picker, you should be able to get the exact color and play and in the same grid of A to G, top to bottom row, 1 to 29, left to right columns. Without the text, you should see something like what I'm going to show you on the screen, which is password is HOC J7K4X. So basically going back to home and then going back to open. For the last time to enter a directory, we know that the valid directory is S72 JSF-K1, and the password for that is HOC J7K4X. And this is where you're on the final stretch, you're on the final puzzle of the game. To enter the adjacent room, you must answer, where are you? Please address. How many subjects were there? Count the cards down to the decimal. Check the middle of the cloud. Elements of cracking tiles running on fumes left and right. 11 digits. So we are very close. If we get those 11 digits, we can answer the final 11 inputs on the final keypad. If that's it, let's begin. Where are you? Please address. This section requires us to be very familiar of where are we. To be specifically, that when you beaten chapter 6 part 3 in the ending, with the newspaper tells us that we are in Tripress. But just knowing that we're in the Tripress building doesn't explain what the address of where Tripress is. We only know we're in Tripress. So where are we? So this is where a bit of a short explanation comes in, but it's officially from Andrew, so I'll just say anyways. Remember the blueprint of Outpost 1? This is Outpost 1, and inside the lab is just Henopic's Research and Development Lab 1. Checking back with the layout shown in Chapter 6 Part 1, you will see that there are 3 sectors, Sectors 1, 2, and 3. This means we are in Sector 1, aka we are quite close to the Tripress. The Tripress must be quite close in the first place. Actually no, this is short explanation. I'm not even gonna bother. I'm just gonna skip to what the actual explanation is. In chapter 6 part 2, there is this newspaper, which is volume 1, number 43, which is actually the left A3 newspaper in chapter 6 part 2. In the section Happy June, there is one line which says, or take a stroll down Olive Street to view the Tripress on a warm summer night. This means that Tripress is in Olive Street, and fun fact, if you actually check chapter 2, the sticky note map tells us that right dead center in the middle of this whole sticky note map is 455 Olive Street. And in case if you want to confirm that is the answer, you can ask Janice by typing 455 Olive, which she will give you the text saying the Tripress. It's kind of weird that it has such a long address, honestly. This means that the address or the first 3 digits of 11 is 455. 455, 8 digits remaining. Next one. How many subjects were there? This is very easy to answer. If you were reading the text from Janice, she referred to the kidnapped kids as subjects. Subjects as in the 12 kidnapped kids who needed help, as we've seen in chapter 4. So looking back, we see there's 12. That means the next 2 digits are 12, which is 1 and 2. 455, 1, 2, 6 digits left. count the cards down to the decimal doesn't make sense. However, there's only one place where we can kind of tell and kind of see the cards from the chapters, and that is chapter 4. And decimal might seem familiar for people who knows a bit about ASCII. Yes, this is another ASCII, and the decimals are actually the numbers referred for 0 to 127. So we want to convert it from ASCII to text. And we especially want to count down the cards since from top to bottom, since it says count the cards down. So how do we do it? Okay. There's only one area where we can see that the cards are kind of stacked from top to bottom, and that is the card pyramid tower thing. Obviously, from the image I show you out there, it's very hard to see. If you want, you could go shrink down and check each of them yourself. But you understand that there's always a pair of cards which supports one part of the next floor. By checking those numbers in right side up, you'll be able to tell that the numbers are from only in third base and fourth base, because the first two bases are childs and presidents. So what happens is that basically for each of the cards supporting pillar, there's always two cards. You want to check the number of each of on both of the cards and put them side by side to form a 2-digit number. For example, the third row has 3 pairs of cards, which when you take the numbers and combine them by placing them side by side, you'll get the numbers 84, 87, 79. And for the fourth row, you'll get 4 pairs of cards, which checking the numbers, you get 78, 73, 78 and 69. Putting them both into ASCII to text converter, you'll get the two respective words 2 and 9. For a note, I add a 32 there because it's for the spacing in between both of the numbers. And the next two numbers for the 11-digit code is 2 and 9. 455 1222 455 122 9. 4 digits remaining. Check the middle of the cloud. The only area where we get to see any form of cloud in escape rooms, in terminal escape room, is chapter 3, where in order to get the second digit of the final code, you want to turn all the blocks in the block tower with the number 2, which to basically form the word cloud. So checking the middle of the cloud block stack, you would be able to see 4 characters, which is 2 E R O. This might seem very familiar because it actually spells out a word, which is 0. So a fun fact is that all the blocks actually form a unique 4-character word, 4-letter word. It just depends on what word it is and what it is and blah blah blah. But the one we have to focus on is the third block, is the middle block in the cloud block stack. So by doing this, we get the next number, which is 0. 455 122 9 0. 3 digits remaining. Elements of cracking tiles. Elements might seem very familiar to you if you played terminal escape rooms enough, and that is because in chapter 4 we have to use the elements to be able to figure out what is the 6-letter word to open one of the drawers. But they only ask us the element of cracking tiles, which the only cracking tiles that we see are the 2 cracked tiles on the floor. And this might not seem much until you remember how you get the elements, which is checking the checkerboard for the black tiles so that you can see what elements to reference to from top to bottom. In fact, this is actually the exact same situation here, except instead of referencing off the checkerboard with the 4 black checker pieces, you will instead want to face towards the left with your back facing the elevator from where you came from, and look in that direction to check the position of the cracked tiles. Reason being is because number 1, you kind of just spawn into the lab, so you want to turn around and see what the lab looks like, and number 2, the floor is actually an 8x8 tile it's by 8 by 8 tiles. It's made up by 64 tiles in an 8 by 8 formation. I should have seen this coming. By checking the chemicals in the region shelf based on the position of the cracked tiles, you will get oxygen and neon. And by checking the periodic table, you will find a short form of both of the chemicals, which is O and Ne. ONE 455. Okay, 455 122 901. 2 digits left. Final one. Running on fumes left and right. Fumes can only mean one thing, the fume hood. However, the ones we see in chapter 6 part 3 is kind of ruined and destroyed, and there's no way you could identify anything from it. However, there is one more fume hood, which is found in chapter 4. Checking the left and right side of the fume hood, it has dots and dashes. Dots and dashes, just like what we see, similar to what we did in chapter 1 with the red flashing light in the train, which is Morse code. Inputting both of these into the Morse code translator, you should get the two respective words 6 and 8. That means the final code is 455 122 90168. Put it into the final code. You can finally interact with this door. Enter. You see a bunch of stuff happening. Don't know what all this is about, but that's for another day to check the law. And if you check the TV, you can interact with it to turn it on. And that's it. Congratulations. For the last time in season 1, I'm gonna say this. You have beaten chapter 6 secret ending. Enjoy.